Next, social media footage from China appears to show people in the western city of Urumqi protesting against COVID restrictions. This is after a fire in a block of flats killed 10 people. You can see here in these pictures demonstrators apparently arguing with officials and chanting "lift the COVID lockdown" and trying to break through barriers too. Now, there was an eruption of anger online in China after the deadly fire, with some people questioning whether pandemic restrictions prevented people from escaping. And we can take a look at where all this was happening. This is Urumqi in the Xinjiang province there, home to many Uyghur Muslims, been under stringent coronavirus measures for 3 months as Beijing continues its zero COVID policy. Right, we can go live now to Singapore. Our correspondent is there, Katie Silver. Hi there, Katie. Can you just start by going back a little bit and just talking us through what happened with this fire?
Yes, well, it's Thursday night, just before 8 p.m. local time, and a blaze basically broke out on the 15th floor of this apartment building, apparently due to an electrical socket. As you mentioned, about 10 people died, according to state media, 9 injured. And there's been questions since about whether or not residents were able to leave. This deadly blaze, we have seen, for instance, in social media videos, for example, of authorities there taking down fences. State media says that people were able to get out, but it's very unclear. And this, as you mentioned, this area has been in lockdown and faced severe restrictions since about August. So many are saying, for instance, that they were waiting for notifications on WeChat, allowing them or giving them permission to leave. But there's a great sense of fear when it comes to this. People can't exercise their own choice, really, when it comes to being able to leave in such a circumstance. And that's really one of the questions that's been percolating on social media.
When it comes to the protests, what do we know about those?
Well, as you mentioned, we've seen videos on social media of people coming up against officials in hazmat suits, entering government buildings, even entering the apartment buildings. As you mentioned, this area has faced severe lockdown for quite a while, and frustration is growing. China, of course, was first into the pandemic, and it's appearing like it's going to be last out. We've seen increasing discontent in the last couple of weeks on social media, for instance. Even one of the interesting elements that seems to have triggered some discontent has been the World Cup, seeing footage of people out and about, big crowds, no masks, whereas in China it still feels very much like 2020. We're also seeing an escalation in case numbers. Yesterday, for instance, Friday's numbers marked the 3rd day in a row of record cases, hitting almost 35,000 cases, which is quite small in a population of 1.4 billion, but it is across the entire country. A great number of cities facing restrictions as a result of this, facing snap lockdowns, quarantines, and people are tired of it. There's a great deal of complaining, for example, on Weibo, the social media platform there, similar to Twitter. And we've seen, for instance, people posting videos expressing their discontent. This is very, very unusual in China.
And any official response, any indication of any changes to policy or how long this will continue?
Many would have hoped for that, for example, particularly last month at the National People's Congress. People were hoping they might see some sort of plan, some way out of this zero COVID policy. Nothing came of it. And from what we understand, Xi Jinping is very much doubling down on this so-called dynamic zero COVID. So there's no path out of it just yet, but we've seen, for instance, protests as well in the Zhengzhou region this week, particularly in the factory of the major supplier of Apple, which makes about 70% of the world's iPhones, in the Foxconn factory there. We saw worker unrest, we saw breaking of surveillance cameras, we saw earlier this month people escaping. But yes, no sign really as to when there's going to be any alleviation, and that is, as I say, many people in China hoping for that.
Okay, Katie, thanks very much for bringing us up to speed with events there. Thank you.